Alrighty, Collaboratorship Part 2. So I think best to start out with some of the feedback that we got from last time. Some of the highlights I think to call out are that approval is more dangerous than block, and potentially breaking that up would help facilitate decoupling some of these things. We currently have a bit of a gentleman's agreement that we don't kind of wander into places that we're not really experienced in and just like randomly start clicking buttons. And perhaps it would be better to codify that in some way with permissions or in a more formal policy. We could potentially leverage code owners to make that, to help safeguard with that. There's a potential GitHub UI issue or permissions configuration there, so that might have to stay a policy rather than something with like hard guardrails. Our naming is unaligned with GitHub because it predated the things that they came up with. We would potentially want to rename our things so that we don't get the confusion from that. And we currently have quite a lot of members for the Node.js organization, and it's kind of a mess. We have a lot of actually inactive members, and that can potentially lead to confusion over whether someone is authoritative, and also skew our numbers. So did I miss anything from last time that we talked about that should be noted here? Okay, so I incorporated that into the proposal that I accidentally jumped the gun and showed yesterday. And I've adjusted the names so that we don't get confused. So still breaking apart collaborator, taking into account approvals is perhaps in the blue group, and reject being in the green group. The blue group still has the general elevated positions of permissions. Green group is more like write access, kind of stuff like that. It does inherently create a bit of a hierarchy there. So I'm saying in the original proposal, it was that one is not more equal than the other. That would mostly be the idea, but in some cases, literally one is more high than the other because they can do the things. So I'm saying in terms of where there is an overlap, that one doesn't squash the other. So for instance, if blue approves something and green blocks it, they don't cancel each other out. Also thinking to apply the repository permissions and team model that we are using quite broadly already to current things, to more things. For instance, in core, instead of tying core's permissions to collaborator, tie that to a core team. Many other repositories and teams have basically like a two-tier structure. So you can be a member of the base team, and that grants you write access to the repository and stuff like that. And then there's a sub-team for many of our existing teams that gives elevated permissions like maintain. I'm saying that in this proposal, we can apply that to core as well. In terms of where there are cross-cutting concerns, we have a few of those, like in core and in the new learn repository. In those, we can leverage the code owners to make sure that someone who is familiar with the particular thing that a pull request or whatever is actioning is involved. So you can approve something, for instance, but it needs to have, for instance, at least one of the approvals from a code owner. I think that as the broad strokes of it, we can, I think this will address things like we brought up with Wes, and probably also like Brian from the web team, where like no one would question like something you say, and then this would add visibility to that so that people know you are that. Very good. Yes, James.
Before I get into, I mean, how much do you want to discuss the proposal now versus deferring?
I think now we can do.
Okay. As we go through a lot of this conversation, there seems to be a lot of comments about almost like trying to avoid hierarchy.
Sorry.
There seems to be some like a tone, in some of this conversation about trying to avoid hierarchy. Mm-hmm. But there is a natural hierarchy in the project, right? Yes. And there's some folks that have deep understanding of particular parts of the code, and there's people that have no understanding of those parts of the code. So I think there's no approach that we're going to be able to take to eliminate hierarchy in this. That's one comment. The other part is, like, even if we have this separation, someone who is brand new to the project might rubber stamp a PR without knowing what's there. But we've had cases where TSC members have rubber stamped PRs without really knowing what's there. So, I don't think that creating additional levels of this membership or whatever we want to call them is actually going to solve the problem as much as going all in on teams and code owners, right? Like for Quick is an example. We need to have the formal Quick team that is the code owner for that part that really understands those pieces. Or things like the module registry, or module related stuff. Having a team that they have to be focused. They're the ones that have to review it and have to have at least one sign off. Other people can. Mm-hmm. Anybody else can. If you have a commit bit, you can sign off on it. But before that thing lands, at least one person from that team has to sign off. And if we went with that approach and actually formalized that approach, I think we actually address most of these issues, rather than trying to actually have some kind of more formal split and structure of who's a member, who's a contributor. You know what I mean? I think it actually solves the problem better than trying to get a more formal structure.
I agree with what you said. 100%.
How do we handle things where people need to maintain stuff?
That's where the code owners come
in. No. For instance, run CI or like do things to a particular repository.
I don't know, to follow up on the comment about things, I have another question. Like, what if things do not react to pings? Because a lot of times things do not react to any pings because of the lack of volunteer problem. So if you want to have co-owner, you actually need people to actually have ownership, but we are like a volunteer driven organization. There's no guarantee that anyone from the co-owner will actually look at things because it's not their priority.
For that, I mean, if we have a code owner and they keep continually being tagged in something and they're not responsive, or they're not going to look at it, then it would follow an escalation process. It's like, bring it up. Basically, what ends up happening is that PR gets blocked. And we bring it up to the TSC and say, TSC, what are we going to do? And clear it as blocked. So I think we handled it like a blocked PR.
My take is essentially we need to, Node is becoming big, so it's impossible for everybody to know about all the subsystem, and especially ask a newcomer that is being onboarded on the project to be able to review everything, okay? There is, as part of the onboarding, when we do the onboarding call, we explain these clearly in the onboarding, that you review the things that you understand, okay? But it's very important. I think going back to the problem that we want to solve with doing something like this, okay? What I think we need to solve is how can we give more responsibility to people that have contributed, for example, only to a certain subset of Node.js, okay? And they know that subset, but they will not have all the understanding and power to some extent to maintain it all. Okay, so from my point of view, I think we need to have essentially, to some extent, some sort of hierarchy, unfortunately, okay, and we will need to have some class of maintainers or old timers to some extent. Let's call it that way, okay. That, or in other terms, people who have been asked multiple times to be TSC members, but they refused, okay? There is a group of people, we know who they are, okay? But more or less, okay? Like it's people that have been on the project long enough that can do that, okay?
What?
So essentially, maintain it, act as a approval layer that is code owners for everything, to some extent, like the TSC is. And then we add, all of them are collaborators, but we add specific teams underneath that are code owners for specific parts, so that they can essentially approve those PRs, okay, for those specific subsets.
Right. My question is, that was based on the assumption that people actually have bandwidth for the project, but the reality is a lot of times there's no one reviewing because no one has bandwidth for the project. How do we, if we further kind of limit who can approve, you will have a even more serious issue where there's some pull request waiting for approval, just nobody has time to look at it. And if you watch the No Core channel, it's a lot of times is people asking for reviews because nobody else has bandwidth for them.
Nobody has bandwidth. Okay, I can.
Oh wait, I don't need.
We need more collaborators. Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is we are not giving enough collaborators the power to do this. Okay.
They just
not the collaborators, like newcomers, okay? Like newcomers to the project, we have not, let's put it another way. I think a lot of people, given the latest objections to nominations, a lot of people will feel much more relaxed in giving collaborator status to, and if they are a code owner in a certain team, okay, versus the wall of core, okay? Like the number of people, put it another way, the number of people that can review a PR on the module loader are not many, okay? Putting a specific thing on the spot, okay? And when you're giving the collaborator knighthood, okay, you can now review the PR on the module loader, and that gives a lot of people a little bit of, I don't know,
Agency.
They give a lot of agency to people, but also a lot of responsibility all at once. Okay. And instead, if we can trickle it, we add this kind of intermediate ladder layer so that they can get that. We are giving them something, making them part of the family, onboarding them early, okay, so that we can grow on them. Okay.
Yeah. I guess I now understand what you mean. You're basically, for example, giving working group members like core approval, like giving them the ability to like green light something, basically. Because, for example, sometimes you have diagnostics working group people approving things, but they don't have right permission. So there's like, but it's equally valid, but they just don't have right permission.
Exactly.
Oh, actually.
You're right.
And also, yeah, on the note of like, you can't find someone who is appropriately experienced to review something. I think, yeah, it's kind of good that it stays blocked, because you could have, like, someone might ask me for a review on something that I'm not particularly experienced on, and I'll review it because they asked, and I'll say like, the code looks fine, but I'm not familiar with this thing itself. So I can't say that, and like, I'll say this in my approval, and I'll say, I can't say that this is doing this the best way. But if someone else who is an expert in this or is familiar with it has approved it, then I think that gives it enough to move it across the line. And if we can't find that person, then I think it needs to stay blocked, because otherwise we don't know what we're approving.
Yeah, so I believe we have different types of problems. One is, how can we encourage to become more active in the repository? That's like what Joey brought up. You know, we don't have enough people to review PRs. I believe we have to actually encourage a lot of people to review PRs. I would also encourage people who do not have approval rights to review PRs. I believe that's actually very beneficial. And that will not be taken into account, but it will help us to then nominate them later to be able to review PRs in that code part. Because we need to gain trust in this area. We need to know that we are really, like, that the person is sufficiently knowledgeable in that code area. And yeah, sometimes there are small things, you know, where it might theoretically be possible to be reviewed by other people. That is correct. But the downside is sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes even something trivially looking can be more difficult. So having the code owners in place is something I believe we should focus on, and just think about like how we can encourage people to do more reviews. And then a maintainer who has a commit bit can even look at the review faster and determine how closely they still have to look at it and just push it through afterwards.
I think that probably reflects a lot of how we currently operate. Like if I've seen that, like someone that I know is very familiar with this, then I will probably, like, or if there are multiple people that have reviewed it that are very familiar with it, then I think we probably have caught a lot of the stuff. And then that kind of is a signal that we are already using to say like, okay, cool, I don't have to like pick this thing apart. So yeah, if we can more codify that, I think that will be helpful. And I love the idea of encouraging people without the commit bit to do that, because then we have evidence or whatever. We can see what they're going to do, and hopefully we can see them like improving if it needs it. Whereas if they're, I think they're currently really discouraged from reviewing because it doesn't count. And if we can say like, it does kind of count, please do it, I think that will be quite helpful. Did Ulysses raise his hand, or did Zoom just decide to pick him? Oh, okay. So yeah, then how do we decide who gets the commit bit, like who gets the maintain. So you're mentioning people who have been invited but declined to join the TSE. I don't know how many people that is.
There is, well, I'm like most of the people in this room. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so most of the people, like, to be honest, you can just say all the people at a certain date, all the people that have the commit bit goes into this group. Okay, this is a simple blanket statement, which will not hurt anybody. Okay, if somebody feel that they think they can only review certain things, they can just say, okay, I'm happy to not be, but make it that opt out for the current group. And then when we start onboarding new people, we're onboarding them on one subsystem, okay? Which is also like easier to some extent to test knowledge in some ways, okay? Because if you have been active in that subsystem, the people that are already know that subsystem know you. Okay, so it can feel pretty natural to get to the nomination, because at that point it's just it's one subsystem, okay, and then from there it can grow with reviews and other things, okay. So this.
And honestly, I mean, if we took it up, so we have the automation now for landing PRs, and it's very rare that we actually have to land them manually. I think it's perfectly fine for us to just say that only a TSC member can land something manually and everything else has to go through the commit queue. And if we did that, we throw some branch protections on everything so that's enforced. It becomes less important who actually has that the actual commit bit. I mean, that when we talk about the commit bit, we're talking about the right permissions for the repo, which is necessary for some of the other functions and stuff, and that these folks need to be able to do. Adding labels, to things, closing, all these kind of things. So if we just leverage that automation and branch protections and pass a rule that says only TSC member can manually land, everything else has to go through the commit queue, then a lot of these issues kind of go away. They kind of get dealt with. And we don't necessarily have to worry so much about who has the commit bit, who doesn't, because the destructive actions that they're able to perform are much more limited. So, I think that there's potentially some way that we can think about it a little differently, that we don't necessarily have to get so in the weeds on how we define who gets what. I mean, I think it's a lot easier than we might be thinking.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I don't remember if applying labels to things is tied to that like right permission thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some fine-grained permissions in there. So.
Oh,
You
okay,
can
so yeah,
you
like
can have the
create
right
custom
thing
permission groups.
and block push to main and master to certain teams. This is totally possible on GitHubs. We do that already. Okay, yeah. So that's totally like is already that's solved. Okay, GitHub does it for you for us. So.
Cool. I don't know about anybody else, but I think probably most of us will not mind not having the ability to manually land something. I mostly just ask a certain someone because I don't remember how to do it and it's scary. So.
And if commit queue, if you add the label and it fails and you get that message saying it failed and there's for some reason it has to be landed, it's a fairly trivial thing just to ping a TSC member, or ping TSC and have a TSC member come in and land it. So I would rather go with something like that than try to have this complex, set of rules for who gets what, and just try to simplify it a little bit more, and leverage the automation that we've spent years building. So yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like generally in favor of the team kind of structure, and then who gets access to, or who gets on that code owners thing to approve something is the like maintainers that we know and love, and then to be kind of just a base team member is much less dangerous, and we can open that up a lot more.
Right.
Okay, cool. So I think
But I think the clarification there is the difference with our process now is I have a PR that touches a particular subsystem. Anyone can stamp it, and like if it's one person stamping, 7 days later it can land.
Right.
Under this process would be is if that area is covered by a code owner, right, then it can have as many other stamps as possible. It will not land until someone from the code owner stamps it as well. At that point, it can move forward. And so it is treated as a blocked PR until that person, somebody from the code owners stamps it. It can be escalated to the TSC to remove that block.
Sorry to talking about practicality. Okay, the half of the commits of Node.js are authored in the last year were authored by TSC members. So the practicality of the topic, I think, is very like I don't like the likelihood that there is a TSC member covering and basically can stamp that. Okay, like it should be code owners and TSC and this new maintenance level. Okay, so what I'm saying is we need to add a lower level thing than what we have right now, okay, so that we can ramp people in quickly so we don't lose them as contributors.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the problem I want to solve. How can I add people and says somebody that has only contributed to the test runner, essentially, we give them a lot of leeway to approve other PRs, and in some cases that happens. Okay, yeah, and that was not totally, I don't know. It caused a little bit of problems, okay, because you have somebody to review something that they have no idea what, and because I approve because it's my friend. No, but I've seen that, so I'm not without looking. Okay,
so when we have a dedicated group for reviewers, I actually would also hope that this added responsibility is kind of a way for them to be more active in that space. Because as, for example, Matteo was just saying, TSC members are responsible for a lot of PRs, but when we actually have a group where it's like, oh, you have this reviewing bit pretty much, you have the permission to do so, then people have a responsibility, a feeling of being needed. And that feeling of being needed and also being seen as that responsible person will hopefully increase that area as well.
To follow up on that point, I'm somewhat pessimistic about how much you can nudge people to actually do things, even in the TSC. It's like, yes, we say half of the commits are from TSC, but within the TSC is like the differences are very big. You also have TSC who just are not very active, or not more active than many collaborators.
Well,
but anyway, the point I was trying to raise was coming back to the question yesterday about big pull requests. I feel like we should have some, maybe have some threshold of how big the thing is to, like if it's big enough, then someone else who's not part of the people who have committed approving it is certainly not enough. You need more people to actually look at it.
Well, I think that's a separate discussion, the size thing.
Yeah, I mean,
which is
like,
a big hairy thing.
I'm also thinking about we could have different labels for, like, yes, there are like a lot of pull requests. They're just you do not need everyone in like TSC or something to like review, but there are always certain kind of like big pull requests, breaking changes, that kind of things that would need more eyeballs.
To respond to your thing about like your concern about the availability of people, well, one of the reasons that we're doing this is to hopefully get more people in. because the strategy that we have now is not working. So hopefully, doing this will get more people, and then that will, I think, address your concern of you can't find anyone to review your stuff. If it doesn't work, then we do something else.
Yeah. So I agree with Matteo. The project is becoming gigantic, so it's impossible to engage any people to review everything. Especially, for instance, talking about myself, if I see a PR on a module system, I will never review it because I have no idea what is going on there. So I will stay away. Period. So that's why the code owner structure is probably well more suited for this kind of work. Of course, we can't enforce anybody to review, so it might be that some low interest modules will never be reviewed eventually, probably, which is my suggestion, since Matteo was correctly pointing out that as TSC member, we are highly engaged in the process. What we can do, we can say, we get one TSC member assigned to each code owner's subset. So at some point, if nobody's actually reviewing that, one of us can chime in and say, okay, nobody's reviewing, I can review and see what's going on. Or eventually call out directly for people that I know they are interested. Because many times there's also the case that since we know each other in person, it might be that people are ignoring the GitHub notification because there may be too many GitHub notifications. I'm the first one doing that, so I'm guilty of that. But I can eventually be reached out via chat, via Telegram, whatever you want. And as TSC member, we have more overview on people nearby. That's the idea.
I think we probably already have a TSC member on each of the subsystems, if not all of them, probably most of them.
There should be. Now,
Reinforce it.
one thing that we need to be very careful of is that the code owner can't be the grumpy old troll that gets in the way, right? Right. There's a very real risk of them becoming the BDF, the BDFL, the benevolent dictator for that particular subsystem. And if they don't want to change, if they don't agree with a particular change or direction, or don't want to take the time to review something because this is too big and I'm a volunteer and I don't want to do this, there has to be an escalation path. There has to be a way of bypassing them, right? Yes. And it could be that the TSC member on that code, on the code owners is that person, right? So we have to have a process for being able to deal with that and getting around that. Now, ideally, the code owners are acting in good faith. They're they're listening. They're actively seeking the consensus. They're willing to change their mind. They're willing to work through the process. But we have historically many examples of people trying to be that gatekeeper. And so, like, having the process here where is part of documenting this, it is, no, there is an escalation path. The greater TSC can't override, or the greater TSC can even remove you from the code owners if if this type of behavior persists. We have to have those fallbacks. But I think overall, it's a step in the right direction.
How the teams that I'm on in Node, how many of them have organized it is we kind of have a gentleman's agreement that if there is an objection, the team can vote on the objection, and if the team reaches some threshold, then the objector will withdraw their objection. So we could codify that in a more formal way of your objection is overruled. If you don't like that it was overruled, then you have to escalate to TSC.
I think each individual team should be given kind of the freedom to decide what that process is, but with the step that ultimately, if something gets jammed up, right, and the grumpy troll doesn't want to get off the bridge and let you by, then that we have a very clear escalation path where the TSC can vote to override you.
I think Ruben was next. Oh, okay. Then it would be Choi.
I'm wondering if, because from the previous conversation, it seems that people are thinking about looking like making all subsystem things like one of the co-owners.
Mm.
I would suggest not to do that because there are a lot of things that are just like under maintained. Because I onboard, sometimes I onboard collaborators, and I at the end part of the onboard process is like which team do you want to be at. So I sometimes go look at the teams, like what teams are out there to like try to make suggestions, and a lot of teams are just like unmaintained. They're like a lot of people who are just there, like they're just no longer around at all. They're just like there because we used to have Rich who just tried to garden, do a bit of gardening over the organization, but nobody does that now. So for example, if you get the FS team, that's like a pretty typical example. Like it's not really a owner in a sense. You can ping them, but it's not really owner in a sense. And to be honest, I think most people can just review FS things just fine. You don't really need a lot of expertise to review FS things. And there are like a lot of like very old modules. They're like you don't really need a subsystem thing or like yes, we do assign them to subsystem things, but they don't actually do anything. There are like I would say we could try from like things that actually have some coordinator who have meetings, for example, like diagnostics, maybe loaders, even though we no longer have meetings, but you kind of know like they're like active people. That kind of thing where like there are still people around, there's still sort of a thing. There's maybe someone who will just look after the list to see if like there's someone who's like have not been around for like 10 years and they're still in the team, that kind of thing. Instead of trying to like assign every subsystem with an actual team, even though there's no really a minimal team, like nobody really maintains anything.
I think we could probably have at least a baseline automation to at least identify seemingly inactive members of the team. And then if a team is left empty, I think that is basically like a capitulation of we no longer have a code owner for this thing. Maybe that's a problem to solve, but then it is not a blocker.
I would say, like, for example, for FS, you just don't really need a code owner. Like, there are a lot of old-time modules you just don't really need a code owner. Like, most people can review everything just fine.
In that case, I think we don't have it.
Or like, even if you want to have a team, you need someone to do the gardening of the team per se. And that's a lot of, like, might as well just start from like actually functional team and give them extra privileges instead of trying to like, okay, now we want to find a team for every one of these modules, even though, well, that's a lot of work. And you need people to actually take care of it, like do the manager work, and we don't have managers actually.
I'm currently doing that for like 3 teams, so I think it's feasible. It's some work, but it's not that much work.
Mentioning FS is, I mean, it's good. This is one where it gets really tricky because there are cross-cutting concerns. Changes were made to FS a number of years ago that actually still are fundamental problems, and those changes needed to have deeper review. And I'm partly to blame for this because I did, I missed things in that review, my review, and I stamped them, but I missed things. But that is one where, like the issues that were introduced, we're dealing with, some of like the encoding on some of the paths and the fact that we have 2 different implementations on some of the things, one synchronous in C++, one async in JavaScript. And there was just some fundamental design things that were just that were missed. And if we had a team, right, that were actually focused on like doing deep review of the file system changes, then we could have avoided having those long-lasting bugs that are there. So I think, yes, I agree with you, Julie, that there's some things that just don't have a natural team, but there's those things are the places where we can end up missing and getting some deeper bugs because they're not getting the attention because people aren't active in looking at those as much. So I don't know how we address that, but that's something we need to consider here as well.
Maybe when we onboard a new person, we look at the empty teams and say like, hey, here's an empty team.
Well, few remarks here. First of all, teams are not set in stone, which means that if we see that something does not deserve a team, for instance, currently teams are loosely named again across the modules that we have in Node, right? For instance, there is a team for HTTP, one for net, and so forth, right? Maybe that's not the case. If there is a module that does not deserve a team, we aggregate to something else that is loosely similar or something like that. And eventually we can reevaluate later. We can even reevaluate later if we see, for instance, that a team has not enough members. Say, okay, we don't have enough member, let's aggregate with just saying net team, and we move on from that. Another big objection that I would like to make is that if when onboarding a collaborator, you can't find a team for this collaborator, it probably means that this person should not be a collaborator, because it means that he's not bound to, I mean, at least principally bound to something in the repo. Last thing is that, very briefly, just remember that we have to start taking action and making harsh decisions. Is something that I restate often, because otherwise if we try to please anybody with collaborator teams and so forth, we don't decide anything, and we're basically stuck.
On the note of nominations, then, would someone potentially get nominated by a team to join that team?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, we should be into that. Yes, I agree.
To respond to the question about the F testing, I think there's still like the gap between those who have capacity and those who have like the expertise. Like for example, I can review the
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we have pretty good agreement or consensus on the team-based thing. And then we could adjust nominations so that you have to be nominated by a team. And then that kind of solves the problem. But then how do we handle like orphaned empty teams? Like when someone is interested in doing that work, but then there's not a team to nominate them.
I think then it goes to TSC. I think that's kind of the natural fallback. If a team is empty, if a subsystem doesn't have a team, somebody wants to start working on something, I mean, they can make contributions, but in terms of being nominated to become a contributor, that's either got to come from a team or a TSC, as far as I think.
Good.
One thing that I said before, which probably was lost, we need an in-between team, which is the gap of the current block of people that are collaborators now. Like this path does not limit the current people we have. So we are not removing anything from anybody. We are allowing people to, this is a path for new collaborators, okay? So we are simplifying the path for new collaborators, okay? Note that the new collaborators will still have the same responsibility of approving CI and running CI and all those things, okay? So like they need still to be, to some extent, security vetted to a point, okay? But so they have some responsibility, but at least we know, okay, we have this team that wants to do a lot, that is active and needs to do a lot of, like I'm making the example of the test runner because we onboarded a few people from the test runner, okay? We have this team that is very active, so we can onboard more people from the test runner, okay? And onboard them very quickly, relatively quickly, because they know, they put, I don't know, 5 or 6 PR into the test runner. Oh, they They know that that's runner.
Mm.
Okay, so I can trust them. Like I've seen them. We have been on the project for like a few months, so we can onboard them relatively quickly.
Mhm.
Okay. Of course, that exposes us to some level of social engineering attacks, but that's the life of open source projects. So there is no way around that. Okay, like we need to like find a way to limit the blast radius as much as possible, but some blast radius will be there. Okay. Yeah.
So for that, then would collaborator basically just become maintainer?
So what I propose is we create this new meta team, which is right now a 1-to-1 with collaborators. Okay.
Mhm.
And then which essentially is a code owner for everything.
Mm.
Okay. In putting it in another way. And then we do when we add new when you onboard new collaborators, we onboard first of them only on one team, not on the meta team. Okay, and after a while, they can add it to more teams or to get, and there should be a path for them to say, oh, I want to join this other team and out with this other part. And he said, okay, yeah, and then it goes through some sort of light TSC kind of an issue on admin or something, and then it's more lightweight. Okay.
What if they just ask that other team? And
Yeah, that can also be.
Yeah.
That can also be the case. Okay, like again, it's we can keep this like we need to codify all of this in policies, but
Yeah.
like I can like the biggest problem with this is cleaning up, as Joey said, the current set of teams. Okay, like that is the biggest. It's the bit of admin work. Okay, but I think it's viable. I don't know. We were saying something before. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I was just trying to respond to Jane's point about, having people who have expertise, for example, in encoding to review things. I think even if we're trying to organize the FS team right now, it's like that's an example. Like even if you want to organize a team right now, there won't be that many people who will sign themselves up for FS reviews, because like it's something that they could review, but it's not really like something that they would keep on their mind. Like I could review encoding things, but I probably would not sign myself up for FS team because that's not what I always look at. I occasionally look at, but I don't would not sign out to be an owner sort of thing. I think, for example, Feder, who was also like fixing things, but he's not even signing up for collaboration. So there's like this mismatch between you have these people who can review certain kind of tricky issues of the subsystem, but they don't necessarily want to sign up. It's like similar to the TSC issue. Like, yes, they could, but they don't necessarily think that they have the bandwidth to like commit to this thing enough to like be part of the team. So my concern is mostly like, if we want to try to find the owner for every subsystem, it's going to be difficult to like make sure that they all have someone who want to take over responsibility. It's better to like start with seeing this as an extension of the current collection of people who can approve things. You just want to see if there's actually people who actively want to take over ownership. If instead of see extra owners, you try to also not find owners for everything, because that's going to be difficult.
I think in the situation that you're talking about, a couple points. One question that I get from, I think, every new contributor that I've ever talked to who wants to get more involved, their main question is where? And I think this will help identify that. So if we can funnel them into those things, and then we have this tier that Mateo is talking about, where like someone can review this. I know from my own perspective, I would selfishly be like thrilled to help someone pick that up, because then I don't get bothered with it. So if I can go and review their pull requests, and I think they're gonna pick this up and run with it, and then I don't have to hear about it anymore because it's on my thing, I think probably a lot of people would be like, yes.
Yeah, and it might just need to be that if we have a critical subsystem like FS that doesn't have a natural owner, or, or set of code owners, it might just be that we need to change our process, that significant changes to those things require a TSC sign off. Just kind of raise the bar on critical subsystems that have no code owner. And right now it might be that we're just treating those too loosely. Now the bugs that were introduced in FS, that wouldn't necessarily have helped because TSC members like myself signed off on it. The TSC member wrote the changes. So that doesn't completely solve that problem, but it does constrain it a little bit more. For us to just say no code owner on this subsystem requires at least one TSC member sign off.
No question.
I feel for that specifically, that might need to be solved a different way. The different way is we don't revert things when they request fast enough. Like they're still open, like the encoding issue are still open for a few Japanese and Korean users who use non-UTF-8 like locales on Windows, and they're still not fixed. I think one of the primary issue of this phenomenon is that we don't revert fast enough. We don't have because I also contribute to VA. VA has like very strict policy. Like if once they found out you requested anything, just revert without question. And you can reland when you found the fix, but they will just revert immediately. I think for that, like we need a different kind of protocol for that to prevent that from happening instead of just having reviews, because no reviews can prevent all bugs.
That's right. I have a question to James. Okay, so it sounds like a pretty good idea to have TSC approval on something that doesn't have a code owner. I'm a little bit concerned that will create a bottleneck if we have this tier that Matteo is talking about, who technically can do it. If we like very explicitly call out like your ass is on the line, if you approve this thing, then would that be enough for someone to say like, all right, this is good, rather than like looks good to me, and then kind of like ship it?
To a degree, creating a bottleneck is the point.
Okay.
It's setting a thing that no, this needs to be looked at more carefully. And then on the other part of that, like you're responsible for this. We can't lose sight of the fact that we are still a volunteer base, right? And so it's like we can only push that to a certain degree. We can say you're responsible for it, but we can't make you do it, right? In which case, it still becomes a bottleneck. I think the whole point is more establishing that culture of certain things need more careful review. Certain things that you might be a brand new contributor and you might have great ideas for this particular thing. Great, but it doesn't mean that other brand new contributors can just stamp it and get it and everything goes in, right? It still needs some careful review. And if nobody that really has the context for doing that careful review, if they don't have the time to do it right now, or if they're not fully engaged to do it right now, maybe that means that doesn't go in right away, right? Maybe it means that needs to take a little bit more time to land. Years ago when we had this policy of like, trying to get things in more, we intentionally had that because nothing was landing, right? And we had to like establish this culture of getting things moving again. And it might be at the point now where certain things, maybe we went too far. Maybe we need to pull back on that, and certain things do need to slow down. So bottleneck is the point.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like it needs the special attention and eyes and stuff. And I'm wondering if explicitly labeling it as such is enough for someone at this maintainer status or whatever who's not necessarily TSC to be like, all right, I really need to like comb through this.
Well, one of the things that we've needed to do for a while, I mean, I'm a big fan of revisiting structure. Maybe the whole definition of TSC needs to change slightly. You know, I mean, there's, so there's lots of things we need to figure out. But what I'm afraid of, and the thing I want to avoid, is us coming up with too much of a structured policy, too much of like solutioneering around, how we can make this better without focusing on just solving, basic problems. And I really fear that, like, if we try to put too much tiers and in processes and labels and these kind of things, we end up focusing on a solution rather than actually solving problems. If that makes sense.
Okay. It's also possible that the overly narrow bottleneck problem will never happen.
Yeah.
So we could possibly revisit that later.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we have the broad strokes of a plan.
Yeah, just needs details in a concrete proposal written up.
Cool. Anything else wants to pitch in? Wildly different plan or from scratch? All right, I think we're good then. Thank you, everybody.